Do you need a dose of inspiration and hope? Stay tuned for Reach Out and Live. Welcome to Reach Out and Live, a program of music, scripture, and sermon brought to you each week by the many viewers and members of First-Plymouth Church, Lincoln, Nebraska. Hi, my name's Jim, minister here at First-Plymouth. Now, when we worship together, there's a chance to grow in love and hope. I pray that it may be so for you. The congregation is ready. Let's worship.
Our scripture reading this morning comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 4. For what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servant for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made his light to shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed on the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but we're not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may also be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you.
We're fragile, aren't we? Life is fragile. We human beings, we live and we die, and circumstances happen in our lives that often make us feel like we'll break. Life is fragile like that. We know it. We feel it. We sense it. We see it these days because we're in a constant barrage of information. We don't just recognize how fragile our lives are, but all of a sudden we know how fragile all lives are, all of creation fragile, and we can get super worried about that fragility. And in fact, the reality of it is that our culture doesn't like to speak of that fragility. Our culture likes to think about strength and power. We trying to communicate a certain sense of having it together. We unwilling to acknowledge that fragility, even though we know it. We not wanting to show any weakness for fear that somehow it'll be taken advantage of, or someone might take us for a weakling. And yet, at the cornerstone of our gospel of good news is a God who took up our form, lived our life, died our death, sacrificed for the life of the world. Weakness becoming strength. An acknowledgement of our humanity. And yet that recognition often takes shape in our own lives and in the American ethos in an interesting way. I've recently been reading a book called The Culture of Fear, How Americans Are Afraid of the Wrong Things, by a sociologist called Barry Glassner. And the book tells us that because we recognize how fragile we are, that builds in us a certain fear within us to stay in control, to stay in charge, to control everything around us. And that often in our civic life creates this anxiety, this constant anxiety, but about the wrong things. And that then we're constantly fed all of this fear, and fear does drive us in such interesting ways. So I'm going to give you one example. For example, because we're so worried for our children, as any society should, then we are constantly been given a diet online and on the news about children being kidnapped, for example. So you have Amber Alerts and those kinds of things, and so we get this notifications on our phones, and if you just follow the notifications, and if you're constantly watching this, then you would think that you want to kind of lock up your kids at home and never let them out again. In fact, I've heard it in 2024 where people say, well, kids can't even play outside anymore. Well, you realize that the statistics tell us that your children are safer outside today than children were 25 years ago. So if that was the case, we should have more children, playing outside and going on their bicycles and being with their friends. But the perception of danger is enough. So Glassner tells us, whereas we have this hypervigilance about our children, not allowing children to go outside to play, on the other hand, the real crisis is the number of children who go hungry every night. That's the real crisis. That's happening in every community, right around the corner from our places we live and play and work, and yet that doesn't get the notifications on our phones. And so fear drives us in that way. The fragility of life drives us in that way, and we then misplace it, and it creates in us this sense of wanting to put walls between us and the other, this sense of strength. And then this text comes to us today. A community that is struggling, a congregation that's having inner problems, a community that's been persecuted because of their faith. They have a lot to worry about in this community. The question becomes, what are they going to do? And so Paul writes to them, and it's inviting them into a reflection, to see their weakness and their fear as a cornerstone for a new life, to recognize that reality of their life, it's not the end of the story, and that there's some strength in recognizing that fragility. That there's no shame in being true to who they are and sharing that life with one another, so that then out of death, life can come. Out of this recognition of the fragility of life, they get to treasure life better and maybe help each other in their life together to be strengthened, to coach each other and teach each other to be more loving and more kind and more compassionate, to be more like Jesus, we might say, to help one another be more accountable within that reality. Not with shame or policing of one another, but instead with love, care, and attention. Each of them in this community recognizing this humanity of theirs. Adrienne Marie Brown recently wrote, who's a thinker and writer and activist, recently wrote a book called Loving Corrections. And she's inviting us to create communities that out of their own recognition of their humanity are communities that help each other grow into more just, compassionate type of community. She said that she's hopeful that communities are created that become, she says, large enough, containers large enough for everyone to change and grow. Communities that practice this way of being together, that provide fertile ground for all of us in the midst of our humanity to change and grow and make mistakes and try again. Communities that recognize the fragility of our own humanity. What would it look like for the church to become that kind of community, where we recognize each other's humanity in its fullness, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that we then together rehearse this life together over time, where we create these containers where we can call one another to a better way of being human in the world, a way of flourishing in new life. What would it look like? About 23 years ago now, hard to believe, I was a chaplain, intern at a prison. And one of the things that always struck me in that ministry was that I observed these men, I was in a men's prison, gathering in chapel on Sunday mornings, and they would walk through the doors, and there were no putting on of airs, or there was no sense of being fake about anything. There was no arrogance, or they knew that they had made mistakes. They knew that I hurt other people. Some of them knew that they had just behaved in such destructive ways that they would never see their loved ones again. They would never be part of the day-to-day society again. There they were. So guess what? There was no reason to fake anything. There was no reason to act like they had it all together. There was no reason to impress anybody. As if they had a label on their foreheads about their worst day. But that reality birthed authenticity and love like I've never experienced. Because they were real in that moment. Now, I wouldn't want anyone to wear the worst day on their forehead. Would you want to wear the worst day in your life on your forehead? But imagine if we created such a community together where we could share each other's stories here. Stories of great things and story of not so great things. Where we could struggle with one another about our life together. Maybe the relationships are not going great, or maybe our parenting is horrible, or maybe we're not the best workers in our jobs, or maybe our substance use is getting a little out of hand, or maybe our mental health is not the best on this day, not a good day today. Imagine if that's the kind of community that we create together. Well, we then don't look at that as a weird thing, but instead we look at that sense of weakness actually as a strength, and we begin to work together with one another to help all of us grow into the fullness of God in the world. We, like those clay jars, fragile, but the treasure in it, the human dignity, the treasure in it, the Spirit of God that lives in us, the treasure in it, that imprinted divine life in our humanity, then shining through, and then all of a sudden, as we live our lives together, as we worship together and live together, as we encounter each other in the marketplace, we then know that just like Jesus, it is in our death, in our humanity, in our fragility, in our brokenness, and in our strife. It is like Jesus in that moment that there's real life, that there's resurrection around the corner.
In the deserts of your life, I'll not desert you. I will make a way beside a flowing stream. Through the valley, do not fear, for I am with you. My rod and staff to comfort and redeem. Let your faith be stronger than your fear. Though the waters rage and foam, fear not, I'm with you. I am the way, the truth, the life indeed. Do not be afraid, I go before you. Do not be afraid, I am by your side. Be still and know that I am with you. Let your faith be stronger than your fear. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. I am by your side. Be still and know that I am with you. Let your faith be stronger than your fear. Let your faith be stronger than your fear.
It's wonderful that we could worship together. Do you know you could join our services live every Sunday morning at 9, 10:30, or 11:59 on Facebook, YouTube, or our website. And all of that is made possible by gifts from people like you. If you believe that an open-minded, loving congregation can help change the world, then consider making a donation. It will help us increase the love of God and neighbor in both Nebraska and the world. Last year, First Plymouth Church, with your help, bought and forgave over $600,000 of medical debt for struggling families. The FP Just Neighbors initiatives help with the costs of laundry at local laundromats and help fill our neighbors' gas tanks at special volunteer events. And every month, First Plymouth members help feed the neighborhood by acting as a food drop location for the Lincoln Food Bank. There are so many ways you could help us help others. If you would like to join our Sunday live streams or just learn more about our church, go to firstplymouth.org or find us on Facebook and YouTube. And so now we have worshiped together. And it's not my hope that this has strengthened your grasp of doctrine or dogma or creed. Rather, it's my hope it has opened your heart to the mystery and love that is God, so that all together we can reach out and live.
Tune in again next week for another edition of Reach Out and Live.